everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of 8 Weeks to the Essential 8. This week we're going to be discussing restricting admin privileges and why restricting those privileges is vital in protecting your business against cybersecurity incidents. The ACSC defines this strategy as restrict administrative privileges to operating systems and applications based on user duties. Regularly revalidate the need for privileges. Don't use privileged accounts for reading email and web browsing. This strategy is probably the most self-explanatory of the 8, and at some level you probably already have admin restrictions in place. You wouldn't just give your keys to anyone, right? And if you did, the chances of someone losing those keys or leaving the door unlocked is significantly higher, which literally leaves the door open for people with ill intent. Administrative accounts are the keys to your network, your data, and your systems. If cyber attackers gain access to these proverbial keys, they can wreak havoc across your network and servers. As you probably know, users with administrative privileges can make significant changes to their configuration and operation. They can bypass security settings, and they usually have access to sensitive info. If an adversary succeeds in claiming an admin account through brute force or malware, they can spread malicious code across to your entire network. They can avoid detection, they can access sensitive data, and they can completely resist all efforts of removal. Referring again to the house keys analogy, you've now got a dangerous squatter in your home who is refusing to leave, rifling through your personal belongings, and possibly even demanding money. That's not an ideal situation you want to be in. Unfortunately, the solution isn't as easy as you may think. So let's first discuss the principle of least privilege. In a least privileged environment, most of your users are operating with non-privileged accounts about 90 to 100% of the time. A non-privileged account is a standard user account, which has a limited set of privileges like web browsing, opening emails, using Office applications, or accessing limited resources or apps that are defined by their role in your organization. When you set up a least privilege environment, you look at the activities that your administrators do, and you only assign the privileges that they absolutely need to complete their jobs. By sharing and assigning certain privileges only to those who need them, you reduce the freedom adversary may have if they compromise an account. So where do you start? Before you can get to implementing the requirements outlined in Maturity Level 1, you need to create an inventory or a record of all of your admin accounts and your organization's admin tasks. Step 1. Every account on your network, and that includes standard user accounts, needs to be checked for their privileges. Users who do not need those privileges should be stripped of them. Step 2. Identify the admin tasks your organization undertakes, like backing up files, resetting passwords, or adding users to new groups. Step 3. Each admin task requires only a basic set of privileges, so once you're armed with a list of your organization's admin tasks, you can then create user accounts for your team members and assign only the privileges they need to perform their jobs. Once you've inventoried and set up a record of your admin accounts and privileges, you can move on to implementing the requirements for Maturity Level 1. Requirement 1. Requests for privileged access to systems and applications are validated when first requested. So you've determined and documented the privileges for your user accounts, but what happens when you get new users, or the scope of work for one of your current admin users changes? Anyone who requests certain privileges and has not been previously approved must be evaluated in order to align with this requirement. Do they need administrative privileges? And if so, which privileges do they need? Once this has been evaluated, you can then choose to give those privileges to them. Remember to document the validated request and add it to your inventory so you can keep track of the allowed privileges. Requirement 2. Privileged users use separate privileged and unprivileged operating environments. Malware is usually executed through successful phishing attempts, drive-by downloads, or even malware ads on the internet. What this requirement is saying is that users who need admin privileges should have 2 accounts, one that has privileged access and one without. That's so they can use their admin account solely for the tasks that need privileged access and then use their standard user account for things like web browsing or checking emails and opening documents. Requirement 3. Privileged accounts are prevented from accessing internet, email, and web services. For the same reason as the previous requirement, to completely remove the chances of malware executing on your privileged accounts, you need to set security controls that stop them from reading emails and browsing the web when they're using the admin account. Requirement 4. Unprivileged accounts cannot log on to privileged operating environments. You shouldn't log into a system with a user account that has the ability to install new software or make changes to the system. If you go to a website or click on a link in an email that has malware, the malicious software can only run with the privileges of the logged in user account. If that account isn't an administrator, the malware can't do much harm. You should also make sure all default passwords and usernames for admin accounts are updated, and apply multi-factor authentication to ensure that even if an adversary gains access to your passwords, they won't be able to get past the second authentication method. And finally, let's discuss monitoring and auditing your privileged access controls. So you should be revalidating all admin accounts and all admin privileges on a yearly basis, or when someone with admin privileges leaves your company. Your secure inventory or record should include the following information: users who are authorized to access privileged accounts, the person who provided authorization for those privileges, when the privileges were granted, what privileges were granted, when privileges were last reviewed, when the level of privileged access was changed and to what extent, if applicable, and also, if applicable, when privileged access was withdrawn. Alternatively, you can request the services of an outsourced IT company to assist with auditing your admin accounts and privileges and managing your inventory. A managed service provider can monitor every privileged task that is undertaken on your system, set up or remove admin privileges, and revalidate restrictions and apply policies to your standard user accounts. And that's it for restricting admin privileges. Join me next week where we're going to be discussing application control, and as usual, if you have any questions about this week's video, please feel free to send through an email, and I'll see you next week.